You said this place was steps from the water.
We just haven't found the steps yet.
How much did we save?
Enough.
Enough to get lost?
Or you could book a stay with Hilton.
Welcome to your oceanfront room, just steps from the water.
The Hilton sale is on now. Book on Hilton.com or the Hilton app and save up to 20% to get the stay you expected. When you want savings, not surprises, it matters where you stay. Hilton, for the stay.
The road to Kirklees Park narrows gradually, slipping away from the noise of modern West Yorkshire and into older ground, where woodland presses close against stone walls in the landscape begins to feel sealed away from the rest of the country. Somewhere within those private woods, beyond the public paths and hidden beneath the trees, stands a weathered monument, long said to mark the grave of Robin Hood. Whether the outlaw himself ever lay there remains uncertain. Historians have argued over it for centuries. Archaeological investigations have raised further doubts, yet the story has never disappeared, and neither has the unease surrounding the place. The alleged grave still draws curiosity, still attracts rumours, and still lingers quietly in the darker corners of English folklore. The site lies near the remains of Kirklees Priory, not far from Brighouse and Mirfield, in an area once shaped by medieval religious life, farming, woodland management, and old routeways crossing Yorkshire. Today, much of the surrounding land forms part of the Kirklees estate, and public access to the grave itself is heavily restricted. That sense of distance has only deepened the legend over time. The grave is not something stumbled across accidentally. It has to be sought out, and even then, most people never truly see it. The connection between Robin Hood and Kirklees is older than many realise. In some of the earliest surviving ballads, Robin is associated more strongly with Barnsdale in Yorkshire than with Sherwood Forest. By the later medieval period, stories had begun to emerge describing his final days at Kirklees Priory. According to those traditions, Robin travelled there, weakened by illness, seeking treatment from the prioress, who was sometimes described as a relative. The treatment itself was bloodletting, a common medieval medical practice, but the stories claim the bleeding went too far. Some accounts suggest betrayal, others imply deliberate murder involving a man named Roger of Doncaster, often called Red Roger in later retellings. The oldest surviving versions are inconsistent, which is important to remember. Robin Hood occupies an uncertain space between history and folklore, and the further the stories travelled through time, the more dramatic they became. Even so, Kirklees remained attached to the legend. By the 16th century, antiquarians were already recording local traditions, which claimed the outlaw had died there and was buried nearby. The monument itself appears much later than the events it supposedly commemorates. What stands there today is a stone structure enclosed by iron railings, heavily weathered and darkened by centuries of rain, moss and tree cover. Earlier writers described it as isolated even in their own time. Modern photographs show something that feels almost absorbed by the woodland around it. Ivy crawls over the stonework, and the surrounding trees blot out much of the light. It looks less like a grand memorial and more like something forgotten. Archaeologists and historians have questioned the authenticity of the site for many years. The inscription, traditionally associated with the grave, is considered unreliable, partly because the language does not properly match the period it claims to represent. More recently, ground investigations reportedly failed to identify clear evidence of a burial beneath the monument itself. That does not necessarily prove there was never a grave somewhere nearby, but it does mean the visible monument may owe more to later romanticism and landscape design than to genuine medieval burial practice. That uncertainty has become part of the atmosphere surrounding the place. If the monument were unquestionably authentic, the story might have settled into simple history long ago. Instead, the doubts seem to have strengthened the folklore. The grave became less a confirmed resting place and more a location suspended between truth and invention. And once that happens, ghost stories begin to gather naturally. Many of the paranormal stories connected to Robin Hood's grave are modern in origin and difficult to verify independently. Most survive through local retellings, paranormal publications, and oral accounts rather than formal records. Still, certain details appear again and again. People speak about an oppressive stillness in the woods. Others describe feeling watched near the monument itself. Several stories involve figures appearing among the trees before vanishing moments later. One recurring tale concerns a woman in white, seen close to the grave during the 20th century. The reports vary in detail, but the central image remains remarkably consistent. Witnesses describe a pale female figure moving silently through the woodland near the monument, often late in the evening or during periods of mist. In one retelling from the 1960s, a local visitor approached the site after dark and noticed what he initially believed to be somebody standing near the railings. As he moved closer, he realised the figure appeared strangely translucent in the moonlight. Before he could properly focus on her features, she faded back into the trees and disappeared completely. Stories like that are impossible to verify fully, but they become attached to the location strongly enough that later visitors arrived, expecting to encounter something similar. That expectation undoubtedly shapes how the site is experienced. Kirklees is not an ordinary woodland setting. The grave already carries centuries of legend before anyone steps near it, and places with that kind of reputation often affect the imagination long before anything unusual actually happens. Another account, often repeated among paranormal researchers, came from a man visiting the area alone during the late 20th century. He described standing near the grave at dusk when he became aware of movement deeper within the trees. He later claimed he saw two figures emerging briefly from the shadows, one taller, wearing what he interpreted as medieval clothing, and another hooded figure standing slightly behind. He did not approach them. Instead, he described a sudden feeling of sickness and left the area quickly. Like many accounts associated with the site, the story survives mainly through paranormal retellings, rather than first-hand documentation. But it reflects a pattern common to Kirklees lore, the sense that the place itself resists intrusion. Even smaller stories seem to carry the same atmosphere. A gamekeeper working on the estate reportedly described seeing a solitary figure dressed in green near the old priory remains, before the figure disappeared from sight entirely. Another visitor later claimed to hear somebody calling out through the woodland, despite nobody else being present nearby. In isolation, none of these stories proves anything supernatural. Taken together, they form something closer to accumulated folklore, a body of experiences shaped partly by landscape, partly by expectation, and partly by the enduring power of the Robin Hood legend itself. And the landscape matters enormously here. Kirklees Park is not open, welcoming countryside. The woodland closes around the paths quickly. The remains of the priory stand broken among the trees, fragmented by time and weather. Archaeologically, the priory itself reflects centuries of alteration and decline, following the dissolution of the monasteries under Henry VIII. Stone from religious buildings across England was often reused after dissolution, and Kirklees was no exception. Walls collapsed, structures vanished, and the estate changed purpose repeatedly over the centuries that followed. What remains today is incomplete, scattered and partially hidden, which only deepens the feeling that parts of the past still linger there unfinished. Folklore gradually built around that atmosphere. Some later paranormal theories attempted to connect the grave with ley lines or ancient earth energies, claiming the location sat at a junction of older spiritual routes through Yorkshire. There is no archaeological evidence supporting those claims, and they belong far more to modern paranormal culture than medieval history. Even so, such ideas became attached to the site during the late 20th century and helped reinforce its reputation among ghost hunters and occult enthusiasts. There were also stories of attempted blessings and spiritual cleansings connected to the grave during more recent decades. These accounts are difficult to substantiate and often drift into rumour rather than reliable history, but they reveal something interesting about how people respond to the location. Very few haunted places in England carry quite the same combination of legendary importance and physical isolation. Robin Hood is not merely a local ghost story, he is one of the most recognisable figures in English folklore, and attaching his death to a hidden woodland grave gives the place an emotional weight beyond ordinary haunting traditions. Perhaps that is why the legend continues, despite all the doubts. Because ultimately, Robin Hood's grave is not important because historians can prove it. In many ways, the uncertainty is what keeps it alive. The monument exists somewhere between archaeology and imagination, between genuine medieval tradition and later storytelling. The woodland protects it, the estate keeps it distant, and the stories continue to gather quietly around it year after year. Today, the grave remains fenced off within private land, slowly weathering beneath the trees. Moss thickens over the stonework. The railings rust. The priory ruins continue to decay gradually into the landscape around them. Yet people still search for the place online. They still debate whether Robin Hood truly died there, and they still share stories about strange figures glimpsed in the woods near the monument. Perhaps that is fitting. Robin Hood was never entirely historical, and he was never entirely fictional either. He survives in that uncertain middle ground, where folklore becomes stronger than fact. At Kirklees, that uncertainty seems to have settled permanently into the landscape itself. And somewhere beneath those trees, whether there is truly a grave there or not, the legend remains. Thank you for listening to Ghost Tales by the Fireside. If you enjoy these stories, you can support the podcast and get access to MP3s and PDF books over on Buy Me a Coffee. They're £1.50 each, or free if you're a member. You can find everything at ghosttales.co.uk and support the show at buymeacoffee.com/Ghost Tales, and follow on Facebook and Instagram at Ghost Tales Podcast.
Some things happen fast, like a vacuum finding your lost earring. A dog reacting to the word walk. And settling up with friends on the PayPal app. Send and receive money in seconds. Access your balance to send, shop, pay bills, and more. Download the PayPal app to get started. An account with PayPal is required to send and receive money. A PayPal balance account is required to hold and use a balance.